Her Tinder date viciously ended her life. 31-year-old Danielle Finley Jones was from Sydney, Australia, and she was at the point of her life where she wanted to settle down and find love. She went on a dating app, and that's when she met 33-year-old Ashley Gaddy. They seemed to get along pretty well, and it seemed like they wanted the same things in a relationship and in their life. Once it was their third date, Danielle brought Ashley along to her annual Christmas party with her friends. This was going to be the very first time that Danielle's friends were going to be meeting Ashley, so this was a very big moment for Danielle. Everyone met at a local bar, and later in the night, Danielle and Ashley got into an argument over a drinking game. When they were all playing the game, someone asked Danielle if she ever had a one-night stand, and when she said yes, Ashley became enraged. Ashley got up from the table and stormed away, then took out his phone and started texting Danielle over and over, calling her a liar. Danielle got up from the table to go speak with Ashley, and about 20 minutes later, they returned to the table and everything seemed like it was fine. Everyone had a few more drinks before leaving the bar, and everyone headed to Danielle's best friend Taylor's house to spend the night. Around 1 to 1:30 a.m., Taylor and her partner went to bed to go to sleep while Danielle and Ashley were sleeping in the spare bedroom. Taylor's partner woke up in the middle of the night to hearing noises and woke Taylor up because of it. The two laughed it off, not thinking much of it, just thought that their friend was having fun in the next room over. But by the next morning, Danielle never got out of the bedroom, and they just assumed that she was sleeping in. Once it was around 1:30 to 2 p.m., Taylor went into the bedroom thinking that she was going to be seeing Danielle asleep, maybe hungover, but that's not what she saw. Taylor noticed that the bed was empty, so she went on the other side of the bed, and that's when she saw Danielle lying on the floor with a blanket over her and blood all over her face. Once Taylor and her partner found Danielle's body, they called emergency services, and once police arrived, they confirmed that she was deceased. The medical examiner determined that her cause of death was due to strangulation, blunt force trauma, and suffocation. Right away, police issued an arrest warrant for 33-year-old Ashley Gaddy. During that 2-day search, police actually intercepted a phone call between Ashley and his mother. Because of this phone call, they were able to track down Ashley in New South Wales. When they found him, he was on top of a cliff, but they were able to bring him down, and he was arrested on murder charges. Once Ashley was arrested, they found out that Daniel wasn't the first victim of Ashley. Ashley had a long history of domestic violence between 2016 to 2021 involving 5 different women. On April 6 of 2024, just 16 months after getting arrested, he was found dead in his prison cell.
This crime scene photo is so eerie to me because of what's hidden in the image. At first glance, it's just a messy car, but something so disturbing is going on in this photo. It was the 31st of January 1977 in San Jose, California. Jeanette Ralston was an absolutely beautiful 24-year-old woman who was living in the area, but originally from Germany. She was friendly, kind, and really sociable. She was married and had a 6-year-old little son. On the night that she vanished, she'd actually been out with a group of her friends, just a normal girls' night out at a bar. However, at some point during the night, she actually went up to her friends and said that she was leaving the bar for just a second and she'd be back in 10 minutes. And they saw her leave from the bar and be followed out by a guy. But she never came back after that 10 minutes, and it was like time was going on, and it was like this was a very strange 10 minutes. Her friends obviously began to worry, and by morning there was still no sign of her. Tragically though, it wasn't very long before there was some really disturbing sad news. The following day, Jeanette's car was found right next to an apartment complex which had been really close to the bar that she'd been at. Horrifically, when officers looked inside this car, they saw Jeanette's body dead in the backseat. She'd been strangled to death with a shirt that was still round her neck. And this crime scene had so many more disturbing facts about it. Firstly, they could tell she'd been SA'd by somebody in this car, and presumably whoever had done this to her had then tried, but thankfully failed, to set the car on fire. So the first thing police did obviously was speak to the friends and say, what did this man look like who'd been with her that night? And they were able to give a bit of a description to the police, and they came up with like a police sketch, but sadly it didn't lead to any convictions, arrests. Nothing seemed to be helping in this investigation, and frustratingly it ended up going cold. This was one of those really eerie, disturbing murders that the local community, as time went on, honestly just felt like would never be solved, and whoever did this would never be brought to justice. This was obviously really terrifying for them, but thankfully, after 50 years, there was finally a breakthrough. Investigators had collected DNA evidence from under Jeanette's nails and also from that shirt, the shirt that was effectively the murder weapon. But obviously back in the 70s, DNA testing was like virtually impossible. A packet of smokes was also found on the seat of the car too, which would end up being very, very key to solving this case. There was a fingerprint on this box. Years on, Jeanette's case was reopened, and it turned out that fingerprint testing was basically way more advanced now than it was back in the 70s, obviously, and they were able to test and match that print. It belonged to Willie Eugene Sims, who by this point was 69 years old. He was arrested for Jeanette's murder and is currently awaiting trial, but this actually wasn't his first run-in with the law, which is why I find this case so frustrating. The year after Jeanette's unsolved murder, he was convicted of assault with intent to commit murder in Monterey County and was given just 2.5 months behind bars. I just feel like surely they could have put 2 and 2 together. Surely they could have matched him with that sketch. Surely something could have been done sooner, but hopefully we will get justice soon.
The boy crazy mom that tried to unalive all of her children to be with a man that didn't like kids. This is the case of Diane Downs, a mother just as evil as Casey Anthony. Diane Downs was seen as promiscuous and boy crazy all of her life. She married her high school sweetheart, but was pretty much cheating on him since day one. Her and her husband had 2 daughters together, Christy and Cheryl. Diane also got pregnant 2 times from the affairs that she was having. One baby she didn't keep, and then one baby she did, a little boy named Daniel. Obviously, her husband divorced her, and then she went on to date man after man, many which who were married, including this man, Nick, who Diane was obsessed with. Diane loved Nick, and Nick, well, didn't want to be a stepfather to her 3 kids, so he ended up breaking it off. And what followed Diane being rejected from Nick is some of the most evil shit I've ever heard of. On May 19th, 1983, Diane came running in the ER because her and all of her kids had been shot in what Diane said was an attempted carjacking. Diane had a very minor wound to her arm, but Danny, age 3, and Christy, age 8, were clinging to life. Cheryl, age 7, was tragically already gone by the time that Diane got to the hospital. This was Diane's story. She said that late at night on a back road, her and her kids were driving and some strange man flagged her down, thinking that maybe he needed some help. Diane stopped the car and got out to help him. That's when she said that this man demanded her car keys, and then they started fighting back and forth with the car keys for a minute. And Diane says that she pretended to throw the car keys, which I find funny because that's a prank that doesn't even work on my dog anymore. But while the carjacker was going to find the keys that Diane pretended to throw, she was able to drive away. And at some point during all of that, the carjacker had shot her and all of her children. So Diane's story doesn't really make any sense. Also, she didn't really seem upset and was also making like really inappropriate jokes. And that guy, Nick, that had just rejected Diane, was publicly saying that he thought that Diane shot her kid so he would be with her. And pretty much since day one, the police and the public thought that Diane had to be involved. Diane tried to do a bunch of TV interviews to try and clear her name. She was really defensive about people suspecting her, but it did not help her at all. It only made people suspect her even more. Thankfully, both of Diane's other children ended up surviving, but 3-year-old Danny was left paralyzed from the waist down, and 8-year-old Chrissy had suffered a stroke, which left her in a really bad condition. But Christy was able to write down that her mother had shot all of them and Diane was arrested. And this is going to drive you guys absolutely crazy, but Diane came into her trial extremely pregnant. I'm not sure why anyone would choose to sleep with a woman who's being very publicly accused of trying to unalive all of her children, but it's believed that Diane purposely tried to get pregnant to get like some sympathy with the jurors. Obviously did not work. She was found guilty and that baby was adopted by another family. To this day, Diane maintains her innocence and sticks to her story. And yes, because I'm sure a lot of you guys are already commenting it, a lot of people think that she looks just like Janelle from Teen Mom. And yeah, personally, I see it.
This serial killer is believed to have murdered up to 8 women. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the Camden Ripper, Anthony Hardy. On the 30th of December 2002, a homeless man was searching in and around some bins in Camden, North London, looking for some food when he made a horrific discovery. wrapped in black bin bags with the dismembered limbs of 2 women. Police were notified and raced to the scene where they began a murder investigation. They started off by conducting door-to-door inquiries, asking the residents inside of the nearby flats if they had seen anything or heard anything suspicious, or if they knew anyone who was suspicious, and each of the residents gave the same name. That name being Anthony Hardy. Anthony was already very well known to the police. He had been arrested many times before now for things including theft, drunken and disorderly, violence, etc. Officers arrived to his small flat where they began conducting a search which would uncover grim discoveries. There were bloodstains on the floor which looked like they had been in a dragging motion, so someone was bleeding profusely on the floor and then was dragged along the carpet. There was also a box that had been wrapped up in black bin bags, and when the officers opened it up, they would discover the headless torso of a woman. The limbs that were found inside of the bins, along with the torso at the flat, would be identified as 29-year-old Elizabeth Ballard and 34-year-old Bridget McLennan. These 2 women were working as sex workers at the time of their murders. Bridget would be formally identified through DNA, whereas Elizabeth was identified through the serial number from her breast implant, which is something that I had never heard of before. Also found inside of the flat were photos that Anthony had taken of the women posed in sexually degrading ways. Anthony had lured both of the women back to his flat while they were working, murdered them, and then dismembered their bodies using an electric saw. Once he realised that police were onto him, Anthony went on the run and his face was plastered everywhere. He would be spotted in a hospital by an off-duty police officer who alerted the police. When the on-duty police officers arrived, they began canvassing the hospital and they would find Anthony hiding behind some bins. He resisted arrest, fighting back at the officers. He was so violent to them that he knocked one of them unconscious and dislocated the other officer's eye from his socket. Despite this injury, this officer was able to restrain and arrest Anthony Hardy. On the 25th of November 2003, much to the surprise of everyone within the gallery, Anthony Hardy pled guilty to the murders of Bridget McLennan and Elizabeth Ballard at Central Crown Court. He would also plead guilty to another murder that he had already got away with. In January 2002, police arrived at the flat of Anthony after his neighbour had reported him to the police saying that he had vandalised their property. He had poured battery fluid through this neighbour's letterbox. Anthony answered the door and allowed the police inside, however he refused to open a locked door. He tried to say that he didn't have a key, but he did eventually unlock the door, where the corpse of 38-year-old Sally White was found lay on the floor. Sally was deceased and she had cuts and bruises all over her body, predominantly to her head. Sally's post-mortem would say that she had died from a heart attack, so because of this ruling, there was no murder investigation into her death. The pathologist who conducted this post-mortem would later be dismissed as he had made many mistakes like this before, mistakes that allowed Anthony Hardy to continue killing. After pleading guilty to all 3 murders, Anthony Hardy was sentenced to a whole life order, meaning that he would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Despite his 3 confessions, it is believed that he is responsible to up to 8 murders. He died in HMP Franklin in 2020 at the age of 69, dying from COVID.
His life was taken over a fake pregnancy. 23-year-old Julian Williams was from Augusta, Georgia, and he was known to be very kind, respectful, and reliable. On March 25th of 2017, Julian left his apartment to go meet up with a girl that he had been talking with over the phone, and this would be the first time that they would meet in person. His father, Markeith, hadn't heard from him the following day, so he went to his apartment to go see if he was there, but he wasn't. When he went inside Julian's apartment, he noticed that there was half-eaten food, so it looked like he left in a rush, but something didn't feel right. Julian's family were able to get security footage from his building, and that night it showed him leaving his apartment and going to get a cab. They were able to track down the cab driver, and they confirmed that they took Julian to a remote area near Beach Island in South Carolina. Julian's family began searching the area, and after 2 days they filed a missing persons report. During that time, Julian's father received a very strange text message. The text said, "I know where your son's at. His ex paid me to kidnap him because he was caught talking to another woman, so I made him meet me at Beach Island. I beat him up, but I made him walk home." This phone number ended up being fake, and it was made the same day that Julian went missing. Investigators wanted to find out who this girl was that Julian was talking to, and as they were looking at her photo, it seemed like this photo was just of like a random girl pulled from the internet. There was growing suspicion that Julian had been catfished. Investigators began digging through Julian's phone and saw that he was in contact with another woman. Investigators ended up interviewing her, and she told them that she wasn't really serious with Julian, but it might be possible that she was pregnant with his child. But the thing is, she was in a relationship with another man named Antonio Simpkins. According to her, she believed that maybe Antonio had to do something with his disappearance. Investigators believe that might have been a motive since she could have been pregnant with another man's child. Antonio ended up being questioned, and he claimed he had nothing to do with Julian's disappearance because he was home with his kids all night. Investigators searched Antonio's phone and found the same photo of that fake girl that Julian was supposed to meet with. They also found an app to make fake phone numbers just like the one that texted Julian's father, and it was clear that this was premeditated. Investigators believe that once Antonio found out about the possible pregnancy, he spiraled and wanted to get revenge. Antonio created a fake identity pretending to be a girl interested in Julian and lured him out to Beach Island, but he wasn't alone. He was with his friend Stephen Ray Jackson. Once Julian had arrived to that remote area, Antonio shot him 3 times in the head. After that, Stephen helped bury Julian's body behind a trailer. Back in 2011, Julian was shot in the heart and had a 20% survival rate, but he beat the odds and lived to see 5 more years. Antonio and Stephen were arrested the same day Julian's body was found. Antonio pled not guilty, but he was convicted at trial and sentenced to life in prison, and Stephen was also found guilty. As for the pregnancy, she ended up not being pregnant, and the whole thing spiraled out of control for nothing.
A missing Florida woman was just found locked inside of a shipping container nearly 72 hours after she disappeared, and what she has to say about it is bizarre.
So what happened?
I don't know, I was in one place and I found in another.
So this is 52-year-old Marlene Lopez, and she was last seen at her home on Lucerne Drive in Cocoa, Florida this past Monday. She wasn't officially reported missing until Wednesday though, and that's because one of her coworkers became concerned after Marlene failed to pick up her son. The Cocoa Police Department began to search every location that Marlene was known to frequent, but they came up empty-handed. That is until yesterday when someone heard banging and screaming coming from a shipping container next to a business on 2005 North Cocoa Boulevard. When the person managed to get into the container, they found Marlene. She was uninjured but dehydrated, which I 100% believe considering Florida is so humid and hot. According to police, Marlene wasn't in a good state of mind when she was found, but she said that she was in one place and found in another. The man who owns the shipping container, his name is Troy, and he says that the container is stocked with lawnmowers. He said that he first saw Marlene walking around the area Monday evening, and as part of his routine, he ended up locking the shipping container on Tuesday. Troy said that he didn't hear anything inside that night or on Wednesday, and he believes that Marlene walked inside of the container on her own and passed out. He reportedly found a lighter and a pipe inside after she was rescued. One thing that he does want to make clear is that he is not to blame for Marlene getting trapped, and he says that he's even considering pressing charges against her. According to the Cocoa Police, it appears that Troy just locked the shipping container up for the night, not realizing that anyone was inside of it, but they are still investigating the circumstances surrounding the incident.
Detectives described this case as one of the most violent crimes that they had ever investigated, where the victim survived. This young girl was abducted from her own bed in the middle of the night and then left for dead. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the incredible survival story of Jennifer Shewart. In the late hours of the 9th of August 1990, 8-year-old Jennifer was tossing and turning while sleeping in her mum's bed. Jennifer was afraid of the dark and afraid of sleeping alone, and so she would often find herself in bed with her mum seeking out her comfort. On this evening, Jennifer was particularly unsettled, and she kept on accidentally kicking and nudging her mum, who eventually turned around and asked Jennifer if there was any chance she could try and go sleep in her own bed. because she had to be up early for work in the morning. And so she did. Jennifer padded to her bedroom where she flicked on a lamp, grabbed a book and snuggled up in bed before drifting off to sleep. The next thing that Jennifer knew, she was being carried away from her ground floor apartment in Dixon, Texas, in the arms of an unfamiliar man. Before she even had time to register what was going on and even taken a breath to try and scream, this man covered her nose and mouth with his hand, shoved her in his car and then drove off. During the drive, this man tried to reassure Jennifer, telling her, quote, "Everything's gonna be okay. I'm an undercover police officer." But in her gut, Jennifer knew that something wasn't right. She would be driven to an overgrown field where this man pulled out a knife and put it to her throat, tauntingly saying to her, quote, "Am I scaring you, little girl? Am I scaring you?" With clear terror written all over Jennifer's face, this man began to strangle her. He strangled Jennifer until she fell unconscious, and she would later remember that he squeezed her neck so hard that she actually thought he was trying to break her neck. When she came to, she was being dragged by her ankles to the middle of this field. The man dropped her legs, dumping her, leaving her there before taking off back to his car and racing away. Confusion fell over Jennifer because she couldn't cry out, she couldn't scream, she couldn't shout for help. Using the ounce of energy that she had left, she raised up her arm to her throat, where she felt blood. The man had R-worded and S-a'd Jennifer before slitting her throat from ear to ear, leaving her body in the middle of this field, lay on an anthill, leaving this 8-year-old girl for dead. Jennifer would be lay there, unable to move, unable to scream or cry out for help for over 12 hours. Morning, when Jennifer's mom did wake up and go and check in on her daughter and found that she wasn't there, she contacted the police to report her missing. Jennifer would be eventually discovered by some children who were out playing in the field. These children were playing tag and one of them had ran and actually tripped over Jennifer's foot. They thought it was one of their friends hiding, but they actually discovered Jennifer. Police quickly arrived and Jennifer would be airlifted to a nearby hospital where she was rushed into emergency surgery for the wound across her neck, and miraculously she survived. Because of the injury, Jennifer couldn't speak, and so when she was being questioned by the police officers and when she was remembering anything, she had to write everything down on notes. And she remembered a lot. She was able to describe this man's car in detail, the colour, different dents that was in it, brands of beer and cigarettes that were inside the car. She remembered the man's name, that he was called Dennis. And she remembered his appearance, the details of his face so clearly that together with a sketch artist, they were able to come up with this very detailed photo fit. I know that we've all seen them. Sometimes photo fits can be extremely vague. However, this one is incredibly detailed. And when you see this next to the perpetrator, you will be blown away by how accurate it is. An officer that searched the surrounding area of where Jennifer was found would discover evidence. He came across some clothing that was identified as Jennifer's. This included her t-shirt and some underwear, and then also some men's clothing, again a t-shirt and some underwear. All of this was collected for evidence. However, because it was 1990, there wasn't much that they could do with it DNA wise. Unfortunately, it would take almost 2 decades to catch the monster that did this to Jennifer. Despite everything that she was able to provide them, the case went cold. In March 2008, 2 cold case detectives took over the case. By then, it had been 18 years since Jennifer, who was now 26, was abducted, assaulted, and almost murdered. Within that time, she graduated from high school and from college, and she was working a job that she absolutely loved as a child's librarian. The clothing evidence that was discovered was sent off for DNA testing, and both Jennifer and the detectives held their breath as they awaited the results. The results would come a year later when one of the detectives got a phone call at 2:30 in the morning. It was the lab telling them that the DNA extracted from the clothing matched DNA within the CODIS database. It matched a man by the name of Dennis Earl Bradford. Dennis was living in Little Rock, Arkansas with his wife and his 3 stepsons. He seemed a very normal man working a regular job as a welder. His DNA was in the CODIS database after he was convicted of abducting and then R-wording a woman that he met in a bar in 1997, 7 years after Jennifer's case. As soon as they heard the name, it just clicked for the detectives. They had already looked over all of the notes that Jennifer had wrote while she was in the hospital, and on one of the notes she wrote that the man's name was Dennis. They went on to compare the photo fit that Jennifer helped create with a photo from Dennis's driving license, and putting them both together, it is like a carbon copy. It's almost as if the sketch artist was copying from this photo, not from Jennifer's memory. Despite living in Arkansas now, back in 1990, Dennis was linked to an address in Dixon, Texas. He would be arrested on the 13th of October 2009, charged with attempted capital murder. While being questioned by the detectives, Dennis admitted that yes, he knew Jennifer's name, he had heard about her story when she went missing, and yes, he had been in contact with her. When asked to elaborate on how he had been in contact with her, Dennis coldly replied, no. He would go on to fully confess to what he did to Jennifer, and in part he said, quote, "Not a single day goes by where I don't see that baby. There is no other side to the story. She was an innocent, and I was a sick, deranged, beat up little fucking punk." He went on to explain that he didn't really know Jennifer. On the 9th of August 1990, he was out driving about in his car when he noticed a bedroom light on. That he went in and abducted her and did what he did for no reason whatsoever. When the detectives revealed that Jennifer not only survived the attack, she wasn't dead, but that she had been absolutely thriving, Dennis broke down in tears. Much to the disappointment of Jennifer, after making the confessions and after telling his lawyer that he was going to plead guilty, Dennis Earl Bradford took his own life while in jail. She wanted to get justice, and she wanted to face her attacker and show her that he did not rip her life away from her, and this opportunity was ripped away from her. After he was buried, she would actually go to his grave and read her impact statement to him. It said in part, quote, "Dennis Bradford, I waited 19 years, 2 months and 3 days to find out your last name and for you to be caught. You chose the wrong 45-pound, 8-year-old girl to try and murder, because for 19 years I've thought of you every single day and helped in searching for you. In my heart, I knew you were out there, alive, either in prison or living a lie. And now I know, listening to my heart all of these years and never giving up on finding you, I was right." Jennifer is now a happily married mother and is an advocate for victims of violent crime.
That image of the Range Rover in the snow with the 3 dead bodies slumped over inside, I have the most vivid flashbacks of that news report. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was this freezing cold December morning in 1995 in Chelmsford. Suddenly 2 farmers came across a scene that was literal nightmare fuel. They immediately rang police to be like, there's a Range Rover on our farmland with 3 dead bodies inside. Police headed straight to the scene, and immediately this was like front page news. There were hundreds of reporters everywhere, and the whole local community was absolutely terrified. All 3 men had been shot in the head at point blank range. This was an execution. And pretty much immediately police knew this was gang related because of the 3 victims inside. These were Tony Tucker, age 38, Pat Tate, age 37, and Craig Rolfe, 26. All of these men were very well known in the area for bad reasons. Tony was head of a security firm for nightclubs in Essex. Pat was this bodybuilder, and these guys had pretty much a reputation for being involved in the substance trade. Pat Tate was described by the media as this career criminal. He was an armed robber, and he was a general really violent guy. He'd worked with Tony Tucker, that's how the pair knew each other, and Tony was also extremely violent. People actually came out later after he died to say just some absolutely horrific stories of when he was like beating people up in prison in the most horrific ways. Now, where they found this Range Rover immediately led police to believe that this was a trap. These men had been lured there. They'd been set up because there was just no way that they would randomly just be parked in the middle of nowhere on some farmland. And it was literally a race against time to get any kind of evidence they could from the scene because it was snowing and the snow was melting. As the snow melted, the evidence was melting away too. So investigators decided, actually in a move that is not usually done, to take the entire Range Rover away from the scene with the body still inside. So everybody at first was wondering, like, why are they covering over the windscreen of this Range Rover as they're taking it away? Well, it was because there were 3 dead bodies inside. People pretty much straight away were saying this was like a professional hit. This had to be substance related in some way. It was incredibly professional how it had been done. But it was super hard for the police to actually collect any evidence because, like I said, this crime scene was outdoors, and with the weather changing, it was getting incredibly difficult. And also the fact that these guys were involved in gangs and substances, this was really scary for any potential witnesses to come forward. It was suggested in the early days that this killing may have been linked to the death of a girl called Leah Betts. She actually died in the November, so just the month prior, after taking an E at a nightclub, and it's believed that Tony was actually the one that supplied this. So people who knew these victims were all interviewed, asked whether, do you know if they've got any enemies, any rivals, any maybe substance debts. One person who did come forward was Darren Nichols. Now, he was known as like a substance driver in that scene and basically was thought to have come forward to grass people up in sort of an attempt to kind of like save himself. And he claimed that he'd driven 2 men to the scene of the crime. This was Michael Steele and Jack Worms. The 2 men did admit to being in that area on the night of the murders, but they said what they were doing was innocent. It wasn't related to the murders in any way. And there was actually no physical evidence linking them to these murders at all. No DNA, no weapons were found. Their trial pretty much all just focused around the testimony of this Darren. But the testimony seemed to work and these 2 men were given life in prison. Both men did try to appeal, and honestly over the years loads and loads of people have come forward saying these guys are innocent. I do agree that I feel like the trial was massively flawed. Both men tried to appeal but weren't successful, but they have now, because obviously a lot of time has passed, been released. Michael is in his 80s and Jack, I believe, is in his 50s.
Last week, a girl who was walking to school found a severed arm near a park, and over the course of a week, multiple other body parts have been found strewn across Babylon, New York. This case is honestly terrifying. So on February 29th, a girl found a severed left arm near a park in Babylon and called the police. When the Suffolk County Police Department arrived, they, along with cadaver dogs, then found a human leg in a pile of leaves nearby. After thoroughly searching the scene, they then found a right arm, a severed head, and many more body parts in the park. Authorities were able to confirm that the remains belonged to a 53-year-old man and a 59-year-old woman, but their identities have not yet been released to the public. A week after this grisly discovery, more human remains were found in Bethpage State Park in Farmingdale, just a few miles away, and it was confirmed that the remains belonged to the same victims. So far, human remains have been found in 3 different locations in Suffolk County, leaving behind a chilling mystery. Since the discovery, these 4 people have been arrested in connection to the crime. They are Stephen Brown, Jeffrey Mackey, Amanda Wallace, and Alexis Neves, and they all reportedly lived together at a home in Amityville. They have since been charged with hindering prosecution, tampering with physical evidence, and concealment of a human corpse. But here's the thing. They've all since been given supervised release, meaning they're all walking free in the public right now. Their release is based solely on the fact that at the moment, they have not been charged with the killing of the 2 victims. So according to authorities, they're free to go until their next court appearance, or if new evidence is found where authorities are able to press additional charges. All 4 suspects are required to wear GPS monitoring bracelets and are ordered to stay in Suffolk County. The only thing is that they aren't allowed to return to their Amityville apartment due to inoperable plumbing, which was reportedly removed during the police investigation investigation. It's insane to me that they've all been released because authorities searched their house and what they found is horrifying. Police found cutting tools, a meat cleaver, and traces of human remains, but according to police, that isn't enough evidence to prove who killed and dismembered the 2 victims and why. So far, a motive has not been released, but authorities are investigating the case as a possible love triangle. One of the suspects allegedly dismembered his girlfriend and a man that he believes she cheated with, but this has not been officially confirmed. It's just been reported by a source who claims to be familiar with the matter. As for the 2 victims, not a lot of information has been released about them, although police do believe that they may have lived together in Yonkers. But at this moment, their relationship to the suspects remains a mystery.
This is the story of Tia Skinner. In late October of 2010, 17-year-old Tia, who was an honor student and just got accepted to a good college. She was always considered a good kid until she met this man, 18-year-old Jonathan Kurtz, at a youth group church. Now, even though Jonathan was at a youth group at a church, he was still partying, drinking, and smoking. But you know them teenage girls be attracted to the bad guys. Mara Skinner, Tia's mother, quickly disapproved of this. She knew how he was. She felt her daughter could do better, so she warned her to stop talking to him and focus on starting college in the fall. But did Tia listen? Of course not. On November 6th, Mara found out that Tia was still talking to Jonathan, so she took her phone away. So of course Tia is furious by this. But she still get to see Jonathan at the youth group. So on Wednesday, November 10th, she sees her boyfriend at the church. She's complaining that her mother took her phone and how she wishes she was gone. And Jonathan says, I'll get rid of her for you. He not only agrees, he goes to get his best friend in the youth group, James Preston, to ask him to help him carry this thing out. And James is automatically down. Now these 3 are all sitting at a table in the youth group at church. Tia Skinner is drawing a map of her house so they know how to get in and what rooms to go to. Friday, November 12th, Tia and her brother Jeff Skinner is sitting in the basement watching a movie, chilling, when they heard a whole bunch of commotion upstairs. Jeff runs upstairs to see what it is, and he sees his father all bloody, chasing a assailant out the house. Paul Skinner didn't make it very far. He collapsed in the living room and he bled out. While all this commotion going on, Tia never comes upstairs. The brother is upstairs by himself trying to aid both of his parents. When he noticed his father was not breathing anymore, he rushed to the back room to his mother. Mara was already on the phone with 911, but she could barely talk or breathe. Paul Skinner died at the scene. He was stabbed over 20 times. Mara Skinner was stabbed 25 times, but she survived. During questioning, the police said Tia showed no emotion, but they had no proof until they went back to the crime scene the next morning, where they seen the map Tia drew on the grass. Stupid. James or Jonathan dropped the note while they was trying to escape. Tia went as far as putting "my house," titling the note "my house." Really? This made the cops look a little further, so they confiscated Tia's phone that her mother took from her a few days earlier. And boy, that was the icing on the cake there. Jonathan texted Tia that night confessing his love for her. Tia snuck on her phone while her mother was sleeping, saying, "Tonight's the night. We got to do this tonight. Come at 11 and don't text back, because I snuck this phone out of the drawer." The police called Tia back in for questioning and presented her with the map. They didn't even say nothing about the text messages yet. But when she seen the map, her mouth dropped. She immediately started bust out crying and confessing, blaming it on her boyfriend and his friend. But they said no, she was the mastermind for this. And she was. But they all got sentenced to life without parole. As they should. Don't cry now. You had a bright future ahead of you, girl. and you messed that all up for some dick?
Some good news in the true crime community. DNA testing will be done in the infamous West Memphis 3 case. If you're not already familiar with this case, I just posted a full deep dive on it, which is crazy because I had no idea that this update would be coming, but we're gonna do a super quick recap. In 1993, 3 8-year-old boys were found brutally, tragically unalived, and 3 teenagers were arrested for it, despite there being no evidence that linked any of them to the crime. Pretty much, they were arrested because they liked metal music and wore black. In 2007, it was uncovered that the police had DNA evidence that was found on the victims' bodies that did not match any of the 3 teens that were convicted. But that DNA was a match to one of the victims' stepfathers, Terry Hobbs, who was last seen with the 3 boys and had a violent history, and Terry's friend, David Jacoby. But instead of releasing the West Memphis 3 and questioning Terry and David, they never questioned Terry and David and only agreed to release the West Memphis 3, Damien, Jesse, and Jason, if they all pled guilty. At this point, these 3 had spent 18 years in prison for something they did not do, so Damien and Jesse were like, yeah, whatever, I want to leave prison, I'll agree to it. But Jason did not want to plead guilty to something that he didn't do. Jason actually only ended up agreeing because all 3 of them had to agree or none of them would be released, and his friend Damien was sitting on death row and about to be executed for something that they did not do, so Jason did agree to it and they were all released after 18 years behind bars. So the West Memphis 3 are still technically listed as being responsible. Terry and Jacob have never been looked into as people of interest. Stevie, Michael, and Christopher have never received justice, and all appeals to have the DNA actually tested and looked into have been denied until yesterday. The Supreme Court has finally allowed the DNA to be tested, so the West Memphis 6 could finally be getting justice, and I'll keep you guys updated.
This is the story of Rachel Wade. Rachel and Sarah Ludeman was romantic rivals. They were both competing for the love of this man, Joshua Camacho. This case was labeled the teen love triangle in the media. Joshua and Sarah had a very violent relationship. During the 6 months they were together, the police had encountered them 6 times, all for domestic disputes, and Sarah never pressed charges. After learning about Sarah and Josh's relationship, Rachel started leaving threatening voicemails on Sarah's phone. Their rivalry quickly turned violent. They started harassing each other. Sarah showed up to Applebee's where Rachel was working just to taunt her. Tuesday, April 14th, 2009, Rachel was in her apartment waiting on Joshua. She decided to walk her dog when she heard somebody yelling, "Leave my man alone." She knew it was Sarah, so she got scared and she went back in the house and immediately called her ex-boyfriend. He told her, "You can come over my house if you feel unsafe." So Rachel grabbed her purse and a knife just in case, and she headed over her ex-boyfriend's house. Now at around 11 p.m., she left the ex-boyfriend's house and went over Joshua's house. Because he was not answering the phone, she looked through the window and seen that he was playing video games with Sarah. So she immediately texted him, I see why you ain't answering." And Joshua replied saying, "Yes, I do not want you anymore, and you really should go home." Now that same night, witnesses had said that they overheard Sarah and Rachel on the phone right before 12 a.m., and Rachel was screaming, "I'm going to stab you and your Mexican boyfriend." So a little while has passed. Rachel is gone. Joshua's sister asked Sarah if she could take her to McDonald's. And while they're at McDonald's, a friend of Sarah told her that Rachel was over her ex-boyfriend's house. And Sarah said, "You know what? I'm going to pull up." And as Sarah is on her way to Rachel, Rachel is calling Sarah's phone, screaming, "I'm going to stab you and your Mexican boyfriend. I'm going to stab both of y'all." Now, when Sarah pulled up, she seen Rachel outside talking to her ex-boyfriend and another friend of theirs. Now, on the stand, Rachel said that Sarah pulled up, slammed on her brakes, damn near hit her, hopped out the car, and charged at her fist first. Rachel said she feared for her life, but the witnesses that were standing outside said, it didn't happen like that. They said that Sarah didn't even make it out of her vehicle. They said that Rachel approached and attacked her first, stabbed her once in the shoulder and once in the chest, which punctured her heart. Immediately after the stabbing, the witnesses said Rachel, and I quote, said, "I'm done," and she threw the knife over the neighbor's house. While Sarah is holding her chest, she's able to call Joshua to let him know what's happening. He then runs to her house to wake up her father, and they arrive at the crime scene just a little while later. Sarah was rushed to the hospital, but she was pronounced dead around 2:30 a.m. Now, from this picture, it does look like the witnesses were telling the truth, because with the amount of blood inside of the car, it does not look like she made it. Maybe she was stepping out, but it looked like she didn't get a chance to really get nowhere. So I believe what the witness has said just by this evidence. Now, Rachel immediately got taken in for questioning, where she broke down and cried when she found out that Sarah did not make it. She was arrested that same day and charged with second-degree murder. Now, she stayed locked down for about a year or so before her trial started, but she was still claiming self-defense. But the voicemails did it. The voicemails sealed her fate. It was even a voicemail 8 months prior to the murder of her saying that she was going to kill Sarah. So with that, Rachel Wade was sentenced to 27 years in prison. It's actually almost time for her to be released. I think she has another year or two. She's 35 now. She was 18 when all this happened, but they all were entirely too young. Ain't no love worth your life.
I'm just trying to understand. I mean, I would never understand. I'm trying to be unbiased, but thinking of that little girl, the way she struggled. She was 8 years old, across the street playing with a friend, when all of a sudden she is being dragged into a house. She got stabbed 7 times. She got beat with a bat, sliced in her throat, stuffed underneath a waterbed for 6 days, being slept on like she was nothing. That is exactly what happened to Madison Clifton on November 3rd. 8-year-old Madison goes across the street to play with her neighbor Josh Phillips. He was 14 at the time, and honestly, old enough to know better. Josh was not allowed to be outside without his parents home, but let's be real, what 14-year-old actually follows the rules? So Josh decides to go outside and break that rule. He plays baseball with Madison, and that is when the accident happened. Madison gets hit in the eye with a baseball, and she's crying. Blood is literally dripping down her face, allegedly. And instead of, helping her or apologizing, Josh panics. Josh is dragging Madison into the house. Her pants are literally sliding off of her body. He explained this to be as accidental later on, but we are going to see. I mean, this little girl is terrified. She's screaming, she's crying, and apparently I think that was a little bit too much for Josh to handle. That he picks up the baseball bat they were playing with, and he starts hitting her in the body and head over and over again. That did exactly what he needed. He finally silenced her. And what does he do? He calls his parents and he's like, "Mom, please, I can't right now. I did something really bad." That is what a sane person would do. But that's not what Josh did. He takes her body. She is alive, by the way, and he stuffs it underneath his waterbed and just moves on with his day. A few hours later, Josh's dad finally arrived to the house. His name is Steve. And the two of them literally hang out like nothing is wrong. They sense nothing wrong about Josh that day. Mind you, Madison is still underneath that bed, alive and just quietly moaning in pain. That same night, Josh goes back into his room and he hears her, so now he's fearing, if I can hear her, my parents can hear her. And that is when he actually silences her, like, for good. You guys, Josh lifted the mattress up. He has a pocket knife in his hand, and then he slices her throat and stabs her in the chest 7 times. And then he puts the mattress back down, and he leaves her there for 6 days while he's sleeping on the bed. She's decomposing underneath his bed while he is sleeping there 6 days straight. But if you really thought that was bad, if you think sleeping on her decomposed body is bad, add watching porn to it. Replace the F with the P. He was watching porn while her body is decomposing underneath him. Now, while all of this is happening on Josh's end, Madison's family is in full panic mode. They report her missing the same day, and the entire neighborhood, including Josh, is helping to find her. Imagine that. He's out here with a flashlight and a concerned face. Meanwhile, the entire time, she is under his bed. By this point, it's like November 10th, and Josh's mom, Melissa, had noticed like a very foul smell coming from Josh's room. She goes in there and she notices a wet spot on the ground near his waterbed. This mom lifts the mattress up, and I can only imagine the scream that she must have let out. Melissa finds Madison's unalived, decomposing body underneath that mattress and immediately calls the cops, but thankfully, they weren't that far. They were literally across the street at Madison's family's house. Josh is arrested that that same day. He does not put up a fight. He confesses to everything, but when people hear about what happened, his story is not adding up. He claimed he dragged Madison into the house. Remember I told you that earlier, but there were no scratches or even dirt marks on her legs or pants. That just contradicts his claim that she was dragged. Why was her pants off, Josh? He also said that she was bleeding heavily after getting hit with the baseball in the face, but no blood was ever found on the ball or outside. That's weird. A lot of people do not believe that this was an accident. They honestly think that it was motivated, but Josh is stuck with his story, even claiming that he panicked, that he didn't know what to do, and he was scared that his parents were going to find out that he broke a rule and that he went outside playing when he wasn't supposed to. Now, not to make it even more complicated, but to make it even more complicated, there are allegations that Josh's dad was abusive towards him. I'm not saying this to defend him, I'm just telling y'all what I heard. That's it. Doctors said that they found lesions in his brain that could cause impaired judgment and maybe cause him to panic. And this could have been a situation of like a mistake turned into a tragedy. Maybe he took the wrong route, but maybe he didn't. Maybe he actually knew what he was doing and he's just saying that as an excuse. We really don't know. Josh was tried as an adult at 14 years old. He didn't testify. There were no witnesses called. He did what he did and he took his consequence. He's now serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, he claims that he was in a denial phase the entire time that Madison was underneath the bed. He said, "I was putting myself in a fantasy world that nothing had happened. That was my defense mechanism for everything when I was a kid. I never made a decision to do it. I just did." Here's the thing, only Josh knows the full truth. All we can really do is speculate. And as horrible as this case is, there is one thing that we know for sure. Madison Clifton did not deserve what she got at all. As always, I will see y'all in the next video. Be safe.
Nothing, and I mean nothing, is scarier than a jealous woman. Selena Quintanilla wasn't only loved by fans across the world, she was adored by an entire generation. The 23-year-old star wasn't only rising to fame, she was redefining it. People loved Selena for who she was, but she was way more than just a performer. For a lot of people, she was a symbol of hope, cultural pride, and she captivated millions and millions of hearts. And just as her career was exploding into something massive, something global, it all ended with a betrayal so twisted it felt impossible. Quick pause for a quick intro before we get started. I'm so excited to chat to you guys today. I get so giddy. I hope you know that I talk about you guys like you're my children. Like if someone that I know in real life is like, oh, I saw like this person commented this, I'm like, yeah, like that's my baby. Like you guys are so well behaved. You're so polite. I just adore you. I don't mean well behaved like I'm not trying to discipline you. I'm not your mother. But like you guys are my babies and I just love you and I wish I could like squish you all into a big massive hug and kiss everyone on the forehead. Okay, anyway. Selena Quintanilla was born on April 16th of 1971 in Lake Jackson, Texas. She was the baby of the family, the youngest of 3 children in a loving Mexican-American family. Selena's father was a musician and he had noticed Selena's talent for singing when she was just a little girl, 6 or 7 years old. But even at that age, it was clear that she had a passion for music and singing, but not only did she have the passion, she also had the talent. She had a voice that just stood out even as a child, and her father saw so much potential in her that he started a family band called Selena y los Dinos. Her father converted the family garage into a soundproof studio and they practiced almost every single night. Selena was the lead singer, her brother played the bass, and her sister played the drums, and their kind of family was the family that was supportive towards everyone no matter what. The kids were raised to be well disciplined and to know when to behave and be polite, but overall the family and the siblings, they're the kind of people that you would take one look at and be like, oh, yeah, they're close. Like, they will back each other up no matter what. The family later moved to Corpus Christi, where they would work even harder to grow Selena's career. However, along with that, the family was also struggling financially. They didn't have much money. They often performed at small events such as weddings, parties, and fairs just to get by. It was something that they all loved to do, but at the same time, it was something that they had to do because music became their sole source of income. But throughout it all, Selena stayed happy and hopeful, always full of energy and always full of love for what she did. Selena's talent began to get noticed little by little, and when she was only in the 8th grade, her father made the decision to pull her out of school. However, she did stay focused on her education and earned her GED when she was 17 years old through a correspondence school based in Chicago. In 1984, so Selena would have been around 13 to 14 years old, Selena y los Dinos recorded their first album under the Freddie Records label, but that album didn't do well. It was actually not released until 11 years later when Selena's father purchased the rights. When the band released their second album, an album called Alpha, that would prove to
have more success, and it was with that album that Selena earned her first major music awards. She won 2 awards at 2 separate events for Female Vocalist of the Year in 1987. Actually, I got that wrong. She was named the Female Vocalist of the Year at 3 separate events, and she also won Performer of the Year. But her big break came in 1989 when she would have been around 18 to 19 years old. A man called Jose Behar was the former head of Sony's Latin music division and creator of the Capital EMI Latin label. Jose and a friend of his attended the 1989 Tejano Music Awards searching for new talents, and that's when they discovered Selena. In regards to that day, Jose has said, quote, "We were standing at the back of the auditorium when we saw her. Mario and I looked at each other like, wow, this is special. He thought it was too good to be true. He thought that he found the needle in the haystack," end quote. After the performance, Jose went backstage, introduced himself to Selena and her father, and signed her to his label. And even though Jose believed in her and saw so much potential, he could not have even imagined a fraction of the success she would end up having. 2 years later, in 1991, Selena's talent and her music began scaling nationally. I've recorded this part like 5 times because why can't I say that word? Nationally, right? Regardless, her career was booming like none other, and she was a full-blown celebrity. She was still performing with her band Selena y los Dinos, but she was also doing things on her own. She won her first Grammy Award for Best Mexican-American Album, and that recognition cemented her status as one of the most influential artists of her generation. Her album sold millions. Her influence grew. She received a $1 million record deal. She opened up her own boutique, her own line of clothing. She was working with sponsors such as Coca-Cola, and her reach expanded far beyond music. She quickly became a fashion icon, a businesswoman, and a role model for millions of fans. And most of all, she was showing no sign of slowing down. This was only the beginning for her. In the early 90s, Selena's path crossed with a woman named Yolanda Salivar. She was originally a fan of Selena's music and convinced Selena's father to let her start a fan club. Selena's dad wasn't crazy about the idea, but he agreed under the terms that it wouldn't be for profit and that any proceeds from the fan club would be donated to charity. Yolanda said, "Okay, cool, I'll get started," and that was the beginning of her relationship with the Quintanilla family. Sooner than later, Yolanda would become a person that they could trust, and Selena named her as her operations manager to help with pretty much anything that had to do with her finances and different sources of income. But the thing is that back then, no one could see the dangerous obsession brewing that Yolanda had for Selena. To most people, she just seemed like a loyal fan who worked her way into Selena's circle, but behind that image that she was representing herself with, she made sure to keep her past and the things that she had been through hidden, and hidden well. Prior to meeting Selena, Yolanda had left her nursing job under shady circumstances. She had been accused of stealing nearly $10,000 from a former employee. She had also actually been rejected by a different celebrity after trying to start a fan club in her name. There were also whispers, unbeknownst to anyone, about thousands of dollars going missing from a dermatologist office where Yolanda once worked. It wouldn't be until early 1995 when things would start to go a little downhill for Yolanda. And it started with Selena's father, Abraham, hearing from fans who were upset. They were upset because they had paid for the fan club membership, but they never got any of the merch they were promised. At the same time, money was also disappearing from Selena's boutiques. Over $30,000 disappeared, so Abraham decided to look deeper into it, dig deeper, and in doing so, he found that Yolanda had written several questionable checks, including one to herself for $3,000. Bad, sus. Abraham decided to schedule a meeting with the sole purpose to confront her with this information and what they had found. Yolanda didn't deny it. Instead, she just said that she needed time to explain, but she promised that it was not what it seemed, and that she would explain everything. But what people didn't know is that after that confrontation, Yolanda went out to purchase a weapon. And let's circle back around to the kind of person that Selena was. She was warm, she was caring, she was trusting, she always chose to see the best in people, always gave them the benefit of the doubt, and unfortunately, that's exactly what she did with Yolanda. Selena had a trip to Mexico to go open up another boutique, and because Yolanda had been managing her businesses prior and knew the role and knew how to help, she asked her to come with her. She was basically giving her a chance. But still, Selena did ask her to see some kind of proof, proving that she didn't steal the money. She wanted some sort of paperwork or documentation proving that Yolanda didn't do what she was confronted for. While in Mexico, Yolanda calls Selena hysterical. She's losing it. She's saying that she was attacked with a baseball bat and S-aid, and that the papers and bank statements that she had to prove that she didn't steal any money were in a car, but that car was stolen in the middle of the attack. And you always want to believe a victim, right? You'd like to think that someone wouldn't lie about an attack like that, but the timing of it was sus. And on another weird note, Yolanda also refused any medical care. When they returned to Corpus Christi, Yolanda booked a motel room and asked Selena to come meet her at the Days Inn motel. Selena's father thinks that this was one of the multiple attempts from Yolanda to get Selena alone to end her life. And Selena did show up to the motel, but not alone. She brought her husband with her, and Yolanda gave her the documents or the bank statements, still trying to clear her name from anything suspicious. But they were the wrong bank statements, so yet again, she failed to provide what Selena was asking for. Later that night, just past midnight on March 31st of 1995, Yolanda called Selena saying that she was bleeding from the SA, and she wanted Selena to take her to the hospital. Over the phone, she begged Selena to come back to the motel, but she asked her to please come alone. The next morning, Selena showed up to meet her. When she got there, she picked her up. They went to the hospital. At the hospital, Yolanda again recited her story of the attack in Mexico, although even the doctors questioned her story a little bit. Afterwards, the two of them went back to the motel, and by this point, Selena was just kind of reaching her breaking point with Yolanda. She wanted to believe in her, but it just felt like lie after lie. It was always something with her. At the motel, the two of them got in an argument. It's highly believed that it was then when Selena was going to let her go. She was going to fire her because at this point, Yolanda was causing more bad than good. A maid cleaning one of the rooms nearby heard the argument. She heard commotion and then a weapon. She quickly turned to see where the sound was coming from and saw Selena with her hand up to her chest, screaming for help. And before anything could be done, as Selena was attempting to get away from her, Yolanda held a weapon high in her right hand, aimed at Selena, and again. Selena collapsed to the ground, bleeding profusely. The hotel clerk rushed to call 911. Doctors tried everything possible to try and save Selena, including giving her a blood infusion and electric shocks to restart her heart and even rushing her into emergency surgery. But sadly, it was too late. Selena Quintanilla had passed away at the young age of 23 years old. Yolanda attempted to flee the scene, but thankfully she was caught. But to recover her safely and to get her to cooperate, it took officers 10 hours of going back and forth to try and get her to surrender. Because she still had the weapon, pointing it at her own head, threatening to unalive herself, they were in a standoff with the police and the SWAT team for over 10 hours. Later, she would go on to say that the entire thing was an accident and she would plead not guilty. After the trial on October 23rd of 1995, jurors deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding Yolanda guilty of murder. She was sentenced to 30 years to life, which was the maximum prison term allowed in Texas at that time. She was first eligible for parole in 2025 of this year after serving 30 years in prison. Her first petition filed in January 2025 was denied on March 27th of 2025, thank God. And her next date for her parole review will not be until March of 2030, thankfully. Selena's family was devastated. Her husband was heartbroken, and every single fan of hers across the world was shocked to hear the news. It was a big loss felt by so many, and to know that she was only 23 years old, there was no telling how big or how successful she would have been. Selena was laid to rest on April 3rd of 1995, and 600 guests attended at Seaside Memorial Park in Corpus Christi, Texas. She loved life, she adored her family, and she had so much to look forward to. But that was all taken away from her at the hands of someone that she welcomed into her life with open arms. To this day, Selena's legacy lives on, and she is remembered and celebrated by millions who continue to honor her music and her spirit. That is all I have for today's video. Obviously, Yolanda was not right in the head at all. Thank you guys for spending time with me today. I can't wait to talk to you in the comments. I hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.